Well, hi there. I'm Diana Montford, the world's first. How many times have I said this now? The world's first transgender television journalist. Born male, became female, but sort of non-binary, you know. Nothing that is human is foreign to me. But anyway, coming out. Now imagine that you are a soldier in Vietnam. It's 1969, and you're gay. Gay was not a shortcut to popularity in 1969, much less in the armed forces. We are going to talk with a well-known LGBTQ activist and social historian, Mr. Robert Woodworth, who is, yes, gay, was in the armed forces, and is going to tell us what that experience was like. Talk to me, Robert.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, I will start by saying one of my favorite stories is that Fort Bragg, North Carolina was the gayest place on earth to me at a particular time when I was there in training before I went to Vietnam. And
What year would that have been?
That was, I went into the service in 69, was in Vietnam in 71, basically.
It took that long to train?
Sure, because I went to Officers Candidate School. So
Right.
there's a whole series of training. So it's basic training.
So what was your rank?
I was a second lieutenant when I was commissioned.
Did you make captain or anything?
No, first lieutenant by the time I was done. My entire military career was 2 years and 9 months.
Thank God for that,
Yeah,
or you
yeah.
might not be here.
Right, exactly. So my tour of duty in Vietnam was 9 months because it was during the wind down and they were bringing people back sooner, so they shortened my commitment. Long story short.
Couldn't you get a student deferment or something?
Did while I was a student, but then I graduated from college in 68. I had almost been drafted in 67.
You were born in 1945.
Born in 45, yeah. So I was in college from 64 to 68. 67, almost got drafted. Went to New Haven for my pre-induction physical and all that sort of stuff. Because I had slept through the test I was supposed to take at the University of Massachusetts, whatever it was supposed to do to get the deferment at that point. So
that was an unconscious wish to go to Vietnam.
Well, it was laziness, basically. But was back in school in the fall of 67, 68, so I didn't get drafted right then, but I knew I was going.
Could you have got a deferment if, say, you decided to go to law school after that?
Could have. I mean, so many people ended up being lawyers because it was the one thing they could do where they had some practical advantage and it kept them in school longer. So certainly some people did that. I did not want to be a lawyer. So then through a family friend who had been a career service person, and this is before the lottery, so I was going to go. There was no question about that. My number would come up, so to speak. So he suggested that if you're going to do it, said don't do it as an enlisted person because you have a much better experience if you go.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
And so which meant I had to enlist, and then you enlisted to go to Officer Candidate School, which meant everything was based on the date of the start of OCS, Officer Candidate School, and then work back from that in terms of when my basic training would start. So basic training started toward the end of 69. To get to the coming out part of this, I was not out. I mean, I'm of a generation where it was you hid all the time.
Sure.
Or whatever.
Especially in the armed forces.
And before that. And there are people and books have been written about, there's a lot of gay activity in the armed forces at that time.
And in all wars, always.
Always, yeah, always. But it was a question of how you managed it. So the reason I talked about Fort Bragg is I was there to study some Vietnamese language and cultural training before I went, and so it was a kind of an academic duty. So it was easy in terms of what the day schedule was. We weren't going out in the field at night and all that stuff. Yeah. And found the gay bar and downtown Fayetteville, North Carolina, kind of by accident. Met some people there, and then got plugged into a social circle of people on base, enlisted and officers, who would socialize off post and would socialize on post, but in uniform. We were in like branches of the PX having lunch sometimes, when there would be more gay men in the room than straight, and if you knew it, you knew it, and if you didn't, you didn't.
Sure. And even those who didn't want to know.
Right, exactly. So, willful ignorance is fine as long as it's not
about bombs
or
something, yeah.
Right. So, but then I also knew a friend of my friend Lou, who was a first lieutenant, who got arrested soliciting somebody in the park in downtown Fayetteville and got a dishonorable discharge.
Oh my God.
So, it was all of that was true at the same time.
But his mistake was that he went public. If he'd stuck with other military people, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, probably not. And so that was it. And I had an experience in Vietnam where I did, we were in what were called mobile advisory teams. So it was small groups of people. We were down in the Mekong Delta, and we were advising local villages on self-defense at that period. It was during the withdrawal of forces. Americans were supposed to be taking a step back and advising, but not.
Right, and you were teaching them to fish as opposed to giving them a fish.
Yeah. So it would be 4, 5, 6 people depending where we were, and every 3 months we'd rotate and move someplace else. So in one of the villages we were in, my interpreter, because we always had an interpreter who lived with the team, was talking about the fact that one of the soldiers who was in this compound where we were living, that they were, I've forgotten the terminology, I wish I could remember exactly what he said, but they were, he let it be known that they were having sex with each other, these two men. And it was clearly kind of an invitation, at least to have a conversation.
He wanted you, basically.
Yeah, so he was probably coming on, but talk about terrifying.
Sure.
At that moment. So I.
You didn't know if it was a trick.
Yeah, and just it would too complicated for a whole variety of reasons, and not just gay stuff. I mean, it was about because we were in an environment that was partially hostile, and all that other stuff going on. It was indeed a war situation. So, but it was everywhere, but the experience in Fort Bragg was kind of like my first kind of social gay experience, where it was beyond the kind of like the furtive kind of experimental connections.
That's always in every war. They say the Mattachine Society started because all the World War II people knew that there were other people.
Right, yeah.
And by the way, Bettina Ballard, in her book In My Fashion, she was the fashion editor of Vogue, French Vogue. When she joined the Wax or the Waves, one of those things, or the Red Cross, was told in a lecture hall with other women, whatever you have to do to avoid being pregnant is fine. Whatever sexual outlet you can find that will not make you pregnant, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, is fine. It was a tacit approval of lesbian activity.
That's very interesting, yeah. So that was part of coming out, but coming out has...
Well, did you have sex in Vietnam with a man?
No, not in Vietnam.
With a woman?
Well, on R&R I did. But
you did it with a woman?
No, with a man in Sydney. When
Australia?
I was yeah, that was... R&R was, just so people understand, when you were...
Rest and recreation.
Rest and recreation, and you always got, within a year, you're supposed to have at least one R&R period, and it was a week. And you go, and there were, package flights. You think about this, tens of thousands of people involved in this, and processes for doing it. A lot of people went to Bangkok was favorite. I wanted Western food. So I decided. Plus the fact my father had been in Sydney in the Second World War. So his R&R had been in Sydney when he was in the South Pacific. So I said, well, that might be fun. Loved Sydney, actually. Would love to go back to Australia.
Was this a civilian you had sex with?
Yeah. So
did you go to a gay bar?
Gay bar, sure.
Did you wear your uniform?
No, because we were in R&R. I didn't even take uniforms. although maybe we traveled in it, I can't even remember anymore.
What did you do with your street clothes when you were in uniform? You put them somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, everybody had some street clothes. So you book a hotel, you know.
No,
So,
but I mean,
yeah.
when you're in Vietnam with the bombs falling, where are your civvies? I mean, are they back on the base? Or?
Yeah, I mean, have some. It's a very interesting question, which I've never thought about. So whatever it was. I may have bought them in Sydney. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
and even better because then you look like the locals. You know?
Yeah, right. So, so the Army was that kind of a period where it was semi-hiding, semi-out, becoming more aware of the fact that there's more people like me than I thought there were.
As I've said, that happens in every war.
Yep. And then back to Connecticut after the Army. But then...
Where you're from?
Where I'm from, yeah. Born in Massachusetts, raised and lived in Connecticut to adulthood. And then the other interesting thing that happens is that while I was in Vietnam, I was applying to graduate school, so that when I got out, I was going to go to Cornell for city planning. So that had come to fruition. No, not an architect. I was always interested in architecture, but at that point I said, architecture, it's a 3 to 4 year program. There's no way I'm going to do that. But related to it is city planning, so that might be something.
And have you done city planning?
Did. Was a city planner in Connecticut and a couple of places.
In Hartford?
No, in Farmington and New Britain. After Cornell and before I came to the city, and did historic preservation work in New Britain, and then ended up working at the LGBT Community Center, which is a historic building in an historic district.
It was a school
we renovated it twice. Yeah, so everything leads to everything else. But then also my college glee club was famous for traveling, both when I was in school and afterwards. In 1972, which was the summer between getting out of the Army and then going to Cornell, they did a tour to Africa, South Asia, and for a month for the State Department.
Right.
And we did many amazing stories about that trip. And they invited a few graduates to go because we had to take malarial pills and do all that kind of stuff, and so they needed a couple of people who were older to help do that stuff. But among the things that we would always do, because we were traveling to the State Department, our host was always the senior ranking American official in country at the time, the ambassador, the charge d'affaires. Yeah. And part of what we did was went to diplomatic events. And so I wore as kind of my field jacket from my military uniform.
That was very in those days, yeah.
Yeah, the fatigue jacket.
I used the musette bag as a purse at that time, yeah. It was very in.
Yeah, and so all the appropriate insignia taken off it because I couldn't wear it that way. And so that would sometimes start conversations. So there were several times when we were in Africa in particular that I remember where would be in some diplomatic reception after we performed, and then the subject would come up about that I'd been in Vietnam, and people were always astounded because I think everybody who went there died.
Or worse, or was disfigured beyond repair.
Yeah, so the fact that there was somebody who came back was kind of astounding to them because of the coverage in the International Herald Tribune and the National Press, wherever they were. So that kind of has been part of the coming out story in a way, because the gay part didn't come into even on that tour. Like I was out to a couple of people, but it wasn't the major point of conversation.
Right,
we were traveling as a group and all that sort of stuff.
How do you come out? What did you say? Well, I like boys, not girls, that kind of thing?
No, come out as gay. Like I came out to somebody who was in my training. We were almost in almost all the same training situations through our entire career. Ended up in adjoining provinces in Vietnam. And so he was one of my best friends in the Army, and I came out to him as gay.
How did you do that?
I just said, he was beginning to wonder why I was never around when we were in Fort Bragg,
right?
Because I was hanging out with him. And so I sort of let him know in a kind of
in an oblique way.
In an oblique way that, I'd met somebody, and so now when we talk, and he's married, his kids live in South Carolina, but I'm kind of like the gay buddy from the Army days.
Right.
And so his wife just sent me a book by somebody who is an Army doctor and talks about his coming out story. So
how do you make it obliquely clear to someone that you're gay?
Just sort of in that event, in that case, it was about saying that there's some private things that are going on with me that I can't really talk about, but it's not about you. I'm trying to say
like I'm not avoiding you. It's just
right. Yeah.
Well, didn't he say, "Got a girl, huh"?
No, he didn't, because I think ultimately he probably got it, and from and this would be at a bar with go-go dancers,
right? Girl go-go dancers.
Yeah, girl go-go dancers on post.
You're kidding? They had girl go-go dancers on the post?
Absolutely. Officers Club, So, after, and this was, there's a lot of training going on.
Do they give condoms to the people or not?
That, I never saw anything about that ever. Like, I don't even remember getting training about STDs,
Really?
like they don't recall any of that, actually. So, and I was kind of an innocent anyway. So, so I would not kind of imagine things happening because I just, I was oblivious basically to about stuff that was going on.
What did you do when girls came on to you?
Well, I dated wax because there were certain things in certain parts of the
sure, like social
career,
occasions and all that.
You have to do things, and you have to bring a date and all that sort of stuff. And so
didn't they say, so you want to do something or what?
No, and I was very shy, and people read that.
And they took it that was it, not that you were...
right. So.
And also some wax probably had crew cuts and big muscles and weren't too interested in you either. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it did, not the issue. And then the coming out socially continued back in the States because it was the disco era, right? And there were
You make me feel so real.
And there were just more
pushing
clubs and so forth, and places to cruise and all this sort of stuff. So that just became part of the routine. And then by accident, I met somebody in '78 at a gay bar in the town where he was from, and he had moved to New York, and he couldn't believe there was a gay bar in his hometown. Mm-hmm. And he came in and said hi to a friend who happened to be a friend of mine, and who then introduced us. And along the sort of that was what led to coming to New York. Lived in the Lower East Side, started a card shop, kind of a survival business.
Card shop?
A card shop.
Like
cards
baseball cards?
No, cards and gifts, like greeting cards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on 2nd Avenue, back in the day when it was people said
and people still sent cards, yeah.
Mm-hmm, right, and weren't quite so sure 2nd Avenue was the place where you really wanted to have a business, but
what
but
street?
We did. 2nd Avenue and 5th.
Really, the East Village?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was East Village in a time when the East Village, before it gentrified.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The Club 82 was on 4th and 2nd Avenue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. And the Hells Angels were on 3rd Street, between 2nd and 1st, which is part of what kept the neighborhood safe.
Oh, yeah. And you're not kidding. They were quite protective of the neighborhood.
Absolutely. They owned several tenements, and the only thing that ever happened that was where you even know that they were there really was when they'd do a run, and they'd all gather on the motorcycles, and off they'd go for a run. Yeah. And
they were not averse to trans folk. Mm-hmm. Those of us who went to the 82, which was then a rock club by that time, to see, like, say, Wayne County. Hi, Wayne, Jane. And others, they're quite kind. Let's put it that way.
How long did 82 Club last?
I believe from the 50s through, sadly, the early 80s when AIDS put paid to all those places.
Yeah, right, yeah. Because I think we have, in the archive, there are photographs of people in the 82 Club, like in the 40s or 50s,
Sure,
right? Yeah, because it was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was fancy, everybody dressed
I
up.
have met trans women. I met the trans women there when I was a teenager, whom I know today,
Yeah.
who became activists, and as I did. You know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So now let me ask you a question. If someone out there wants to come out, but is, say, in a small town and is wary of coming out because he or she's afraid of being murdered, what would you say to that person?
Well, Google, like, what's available to people today is different than what was available to earlier generations, where you can at least find online some information and places to go. Like in the early days of the community center, I started working at the community center in '83.
Which is when it opened.
And when it opened, and at that point, that's all pre-internet. So we used to get calls all the time from people who would be trying to figure out, like, and the gay switchboards.
I volunteered at the Gender Identity Project. I know,
Yeah. So, and that was the era of gay hotlines, which that was the way in which you could find, if you knew enough to find out the number of the gay hotline, you could kind of plug into some information that you didn't know. But there weren't that many, and but now with the access to the internet, people can find stuff.
Wherever you live, you can, even if you live in a lighthouse all alone, you can connect with others who are of like mind.
Right, exactly, and find institutions like the center that can help you, whether in your state or elsewhere, and so it's a whole other world. Like, it would be fascinating to talk to younger people now to find out how they have found out and how they come out, which is, I think, a different experience these days.
I think, because it's not a taboo the way it was. You know?
Except that homophobia is alive and well in the United States of America, and there are still people who walk around the block 10 times before they come in because they're afraid. Because they're afraid. So I can totally relate to the fear part because that was how I grew up, and it's important to realize that not everybody has access the way people in New York do. So thank God for the internet to help people find something that they need, even if it's at a distance. But at least they know that there are other people out there, and they can talk to people and communicate. But it's still it's dangerous to come out for people. It just is.
It can be.
Is. So we have to be thankful for the resources we have and the way that there are certain places where you can be more comfortable than in other places, and to encourage people.
If people live in a small town and they can possibly scrape together the cash, do you think they should move to a city?
Potentially, which leads to a whole other thing. LGBT people are, by definition, almost exclusively immigrants. Because we come from someplace else to find.
I was born here, but
to find the place where you can actually find community, and so it's like the center is
excuse me,
comes out of the settlement house movement, where all the immigrants who came from across.
I have a terrible cold. Yes.
Yeah. So are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we are transplanted people who do not have a direct lineage back to your family of origin and your place of birth, largely. You disconnect from them. And so...
Have you from yours?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come out to my parents till I was in my 30s.
Did they suspect?
You would think, but they professed not to have.
Oh, he just hasn't found the right girl yet. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So
he's very choosy, you know.
So, so we don't have a heritage. We don't have a received
no, I
tradition.
think we do.
We do now.
Yeah.
We're beginning to have it, But we're also in the process of losing the generation of the people who
started the ball rolling. Yes,
and we don't know our history very well. The interesting thing is, after 25 or 50 years, what was that period long ago suddenly becomes fashionable to learn about.
Sure.
It's a generational shift that happens. So there's much more interest in like the LGBT history now, because we're coming up with Stonewall 50th anniversary and all that sort of stuff. And so that's now cool, and it's fascinating when you talk to young people, as I do at the center periodically, where if they know that there's a story, they become completely fascinated. It's not that they don't want to know, it's that they don't know. And then kind of having people become aware that, oh, there is a story, then say, oh, well, what? And then they all want to know what the details are.
But still, thank the good Lord, they can never know the soul-crushing fear and prejudice that we lived with all those years ago.
Yeah.
If you went and watch the film version of The Boys in the Band, shot contemporaneously with the Stonewall thing, where at the end one of the protagonists says, if only we didn't hate ourselves so much. Most of us had internalized hatred because the psychiatric establishment, everyone said, you're bad, you're wrong, you're dirty, you're sick. And we believed it.
Yeah. The sick part most of all.
And if you didn't believe it, you were that much sicker, because what's wrong with you? Don't you know how crazy you are? You know?
Right, yeah.
Anyway, I used to tell my father, I don't care what people think of me. And say, God damn it, I know you don't. You don't give a damn, do you? Anyway, my guest has been Mr. Robert Woodworth, LGBTQ activist, social historian, city planner. And he was talking about coming out way back when in the 1960s. A groovy experience. Eh? Anyway, I'm Diana Montford, forever groovy. And I think you're all far out and out of sight. And I think we should frug sometime. But anyway, those jokes were hilarious in 1967. But never mind. Okay, I was born in 1956, but I got an early start. Okay, my guest has been Robert Woodworth. We've been talking about a lot of stuff. And if you're in and it's safe for you to come out, come out. But use your judgment. If it's not safe, don't come out. So anyway, I love you a lot. I'll see you next time. Love you. Bye.